Right, good evening everyone, 6 o'clock. Welcome. Thank you for attending this meeting of the Governance Committee. Oh, that's gone away good. Tuesday, 7th of March 2023. Before we start this evening, I'd like to outline some housekeeping rules. There's no planned fire alarms, so if it does sound, please leave via the emergency exits behind Colin. Can I request that all mobile phones are kept on silent and switched off? Thanks very much. So this evening we're joined by councillors, external auditor Matt Derricks with us from Grant Thornton tonight, and also just to introduce you to Jeannie Waddington, who's with us in the audience. She's our new Deputy Section 151 officer. So welcome to Jeannie. Members of the committee are attending in person at the Civic Centre, and other members of the council may also dial into the meeting via Teams. Don't know if we've got anybody dialed in to observe and or participate in the meeting. The meeting is live streamed on YouTube, and the web link for this can be found on the council's website. Members on Teams are asked to keep their microphone on mute and only unmute when they wish to speak. And could I remind members to unmute themselves once they've finished speaking to enable the meeting to proceed smoothly. Okay, with that, we can get cracking. So item 1, apologies.
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest to declare? No? Wonderful. Moving on to item 3, the minutes of the last meeting. So I've got those to sign. Are there any matters arising or points from those minutes? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It relates to page 5, number 38, and the resolutions. I'm just wondering if you have sent the letter to the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I actually have the letter. The Chair has signed it this evening, so it'll be going to. I'll pass it to him tomorrow. Apologies, yes, there are copies at the meeting tonight to pass round to members. I didn't want to circulate it until the Chair had signed it in case there were any amendments.
Could I, at this point then, express my displeasure, and it is displeasure, that we are now from the 10th of January to the, the 7th of March, and it has taken that long to write a letter that it has to be given to you this evening. And I think it is really not in order. That letter should have gone weeks ago, and we should have now been having some progress on this. So would you please note my displeasure?
Yes, absolutely. And I do apologise, Councillor Smith.
Apologise, to be quite honest, Mr. Moister. I think it's for the chairman to apologise, because he was instructed by this committee to write to the Chief Executive on the 10th of January.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. I'm not going to apologise personally, because there were a number of reasons why we are where we are with the letter, but it has been signed. You'll get a copy and progress will be made, but noted. Thanks very much. So back to the minutes, and is there anything else on the minutes before we sign those off? No? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, audit progress report and sector update, and Matt is going to present this item. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. So first report, the progress update, page 10 in the pack just sets out the current position on the 21-22 audit. We're imminently going to finalise the audit. I've updated audit finance report is the next paper on the agenda. In terms of the progress since the last committee meeting, there has been some significant changes to the CIPFA code, which I'll cover more in the audit findings report. But in January, CIPFA issued a bulletin requiring some additional consideration of how infrastructure assets are accounted for, which impacts the South Ribble accounts as there are kind of material infrastructure balances in the accounts. And the authority has implemented the temporary solution that's proposed in the SIPFA bulletin, and that's been reviewed by ourselves as part of the final accounts audit. I'd just like to highlight that we are expected to bring the auditor's annual report, which is our VFM report, to the May committee. It's previously planned to bring to this committee, but we are following up on some further inquiries before we issue that report. But that work is almost finalised and will be issued to this committee for the May meeting. The rest of the pack just contains our sector update, which is some useful insights into the sector and developments in the audit market. Take any questions, Chair.
Thanks very much, Matt. So, any questions or comments? Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just in relation to the annual report, as far as I can read from this, it's the value for money report that's effectively holding that up. If we go back through the reports that you've issued over the last few months, the value for money report was promised initially in September, then it went to November, then it went to January, then it went to February. Here we are in March, and we're now being told May. Can you just explain the story behind that? And what is the government's or SIPFA's drop dead date for the annual report to be issued by councils? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So the requirements are that we publish the annual report within 3 months of the financial accounts opinion, which we're due to issue this week. So in terms of the timetable, we have that kind of 3 months beyond the issue of the opinion on the accounts to issue our auditor's annual report containing the VFM conclusions. So we're within the timetable allowed by the regulations. In terms of the reason for the delay, the work has been ongoing over the past few months, and the reports are in draft, and we're due to share them with management imminently for comment. But we are following up on one of the procurement reports that was issued recently by Internal Audit, and some further inquiries in that area before we issue the VFM report as final.
If you go back to the original date, September, we're now talking about an 8-month delay within a financial year. That's 2/3 of the year delay. It just seems incredibly poor, to be honest.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but our conclusions and work related to the VFM report is intrinsically linked to our work on the financial audit overall, and the delivery is in line with the timetable for the requirements for publishing within 3 months of the accounts opinion, which will be this week, hopefully.
Any other questions or comments? Nope. Okay, thanks very much. We'll move on swiftly to item 5, the final audit findings report 2021-2022 and the addendum to report statement of accounts 2021-2022. This was in the agenda supplement 2, and Louise is going to present this item.
Chair, the first element of the item, the audit findings, Matt would.
Okay. Yeah, crack on with that bit first.
Thank you. So this is our final audit findings report. It was issued as drafted back in November, pending some further the resolution of some outstanding inquiries on the accounts and finalisation of our work. The overall content is broadly the same as the draft version issued previously. Where there are changes, I'll just draw the committee's attention to that. So the first is page 11, which just sets out our findings on our audit of the pension fund, and the outstanding kind of inquiries that were contained in the previous version of the report were to do with the treatment of a lump sum payment for employer contributions that was paid in 2021 for kind of 3 years in one go, and the treatment of that by the actuary who provides the updated valuations of the pension liabilities and assets. and that actuarial report has been reworked to include the lump sum payment as expected, and that's now been updated in the accounts. Additionally, there were some changes required for the accounting for the additional liability and assets brought into the council's accounts in respect to the leisure company, and also the transfer from the council to the new company. Again, some changes were required due to some misstatements in how that had been accounted for in the initial version of the accounts. Page 12 just sets out our findings on the audit of the valuation of land and buildings and investment properties. An additional finding since the draft report was issued is to do with assets that the council holds on the balance sheet as land and buildings, but which are held at historic cost. Now, the SIPFA code requires that valuation that land and buildings are revalued frequently enough so that they are not materially misstated. So we generally would not expect to see any kind of assets held at historical cost. Management have reviewed these and identified where there's some risks of duplication, and also some assets that should have been consolidated into other buildings that are already on the asset register, and that's resulted in some adjustments to the accounts. We've also raised a recommendation to try and avoid that in future. Page 13. Now, this just sets out the additional kind of risk that we've recognised in the audit as a result of the changes required from the updated accounting guidance on infrastructure assets. So the reason this change was brought in is that there was recognition across local councils, across local government, that there are challenges in how infrastructure assets are accounted for, both in terms of when new expenditure is capitalised and how that is added to existing components. How that is componentised and added to existing assets on the register, and then also how authorities estimate the useful life of infrastructure assets. And this South Ribble does hold kind of a material balance of infrastructure assets, albeit thankfully they are not that complex. For instance, kind of county councils and things that hold roads and things like that, and on the balance sheet are a lot more complex in terms of the accounting. However, nevertheless, the infrastructure asset balance is material to the accounts for South Ribble, and therefore we've had to apply follow the guidance issued by SIPFA in January, and the council has adopted the temporary solution, which is to actually remove some of the disclosures in the accounts on infrastructure around the gross book value and the depreciated amount, to just show the net value in the accounts, on the basis that there is some challenge into how appropriate the useful lives are, and also how those assets should be recognised kind of when capital expenditure is incurred. We've reviewed the changes that have been put into the draft account since the updated guidance was issued, and we're happy that the changes are appropriate in accordance with the SIPFA code. Then page 14, there's just an additional misstatement that we've identified since the previous version's report, and this is to do with cash balances. So there was a transfer of monies from the council to the leisure company back in kind of February, which wasn't accounted for correctly at the end of the financial year. So on the reporting date, the 31st of March, the cash balances were actually understated across the whole group accounts. So when you add in the leisure company to the council's accounts, at the group level, the cash balances was understated, and that has been adjusted as well. And then page 29, we've reported two recommendations in relation to the infrastructure assets, as I said, and also to the assets, the land and building assets held at historical cost. So we've reported two recommendations for improvement there, and they've been accepted by management. Take any questions?
Okay, thanks very much, Matt. Any questions or comments from Matt? Members on the committee? Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to your last comments here, page 29, The cash to bank reconciliation, that's been an issue now for the past 2 years. Can you give us an understanding of what the difficulty has been for the council in getting that action corrected a lot faster? And there's 2 management responses expected in there by the end of March. If somebody can let the committee know that they are both on schedule to be achieved by 31st of March. Thank you.
So on the cash issue, yeah, this is a previous recommendation that we've raised in the 2021 audit, and we can continue to see some issues in the reconciliation process. And the main issue is really that there's a main kind of bank account that the council use for receipts and payments, but then there are other bank accounts as well that, albeit don't have significant volumes of transactions flowing through them, but in any case, the cash to bank reconciliation is an expected control that we would expect to see covering all bank accounts to reconcile the cash position at the year end. So that's still kind of the issue that remains. In terms of the other recommendations where the response is kind of the expected delivery for the 31st of March, I could probably defer to Louise maybe to come in on those, but we do anticipate that being correct, those being implemented for the 22-23 accounts, so that those problems will hopefully won't be taken forward in the future.
Yep. Sorry, in relation.
So just on the back to the bank reconciliation. So what I'm trying to get an understanding of, what reasons have you been given as to why it hasn't been sorted a lot faster? Is it complex in any way, or is it just been forgotten about or not understood? Or just, I don't understand why it's taken so long for something that in my eyes looks remarkably simple.
No, I understand that. I don't think there isn't a reason that's been given to us specifically on why that's not been addressed yet. But for reassurance, we are confident in the cash position in the accounts. As I said, the bank accounts that are not covered by the kind of reconciliation process that we've examined as part of this audit. And we do still obviously get direct bank confirmations of the bank balance at the end of the year. So we're satisfied from that respect. But in terms of why they're not all included, I think it's still a point to be resolved by the finance team.
Sorry, I can add some information to that. I know that was one of the queries that was raised at the last audit committee meeting, and I did send out a response on that, listing each of the specific bank accounts that we had. So there's a couple in there. For example, there's one with a static balance of £29,000. There are no transactions going through it. It's just that we don't have a formal bank reconciliation that says balance per bank statement, £29,000 balance per ledger. It's just been acknowledged that there haven't been any transactions that have been posted through the account, and therefore, in that regard, there isn't a formal bank reconciliation, but the bank is reconciled. We know that there's no transactions going through. There's a second account, there's an investment account with a year-end balance of £6 million. That's just an investment, one amount of money that goes in, and a monthly reconciliation, again, is done as part of the wider Treasury Management reconciliation. So how much money we have on deposit, we know each of the deposits because the significant chunks, and they're chunked up on the significant deposits, and we do an overall reconciliation. But the bank, that particular deposit, again, isn't balanced per the bank, balanced per the ledger. It's tied up as a wider. There are some where there are some, there's another one that has a nil balance. There's another one with a balance of £3. But we do know it's an area of improvement, particularly on the main bank account, because it has that many feeders that go into it, from payments that we might be making out through our creditor payment runs, to receipts that are coming in from council tax, business rates, through sundry debtors. So there's a lot of different systems that feed into that, and we're doing as much a significant piece of work on that at the moment to try and streamline those interfaces as they land in there, then they can be reconciled more. So some of them are because they're not significant and there's not movements, but nonetheless we accept the auditor's recommendation on that, and we'll make sure that that is formally produced as a reconciliation and signed off accordingly. It was part 2 to that question as well, sorry. And that was in relation to the other 2 recommendations that were made. So one in relation to land and buildings, and the council should review the accounting treatment for capital expenditure. One of the issues picked up around valuations, we've extended the number of properties that we will get a valuation on this year, and we are doing a thorough review of the assets that are on the balance sheet, tidying that up and just ensuring that if they are classified as infrastructure assets, that they are indeed infrastructure assets. Where assets have been put on as Matt said, as a component, then when the valuations are undertaken to ensure that there's no double counting there, that they're not included on the balance sheet both as a component and also, say, as a roof within a building where the building has had a valuation performed on it, and we've accounted for the full valuation, including the roof again, which was already included as a component part, if that makes sense. So again, it's one of those areas that we're undertaking a thorough review and extended the valuations, the number of them that are undertaken by Sanderson Weatherall.
Okay. Councillor Brotherton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just regarding in relation to what you mentioned then about the valuing the properties and the comments made under the financial statements on page 12 when it mentions significant risk, etc. I have asked the question in the past about valuations and how often are they done, and I'm still unsure exactly at what point do we value them. Do we value them yearly? I understood from previous comments that they were on a rolling basis and every so many years they were revalued. And I did ask the question about new build properties, for example, where we have a cost going in. Just off the top of my head, I've referred to Mackenzie Arms, for example. So the last cabinet meeting or last council meeting, it was confirmed that the cost was £2.8 million. So I'm assuming that'll be the value of the property on the books, £2.8 million, because that's how much it's cost. But we do know from Sanderson Weatherall that the end value will be substantially less than that, because we had a report a few years ago. So knowing that there's going to be a substantial loss, would it be prudent to get a valuation done straight away as soon as it was completed? Because I did ask the question at the last council meeting. I asked the cabinet member if Sanderson Weatherall were going to come back to value it on completion. Sorry, I just need some water. And the answer I got was, no, it'll cost too much money to value it. We're not going to bother, effectively, which I thought was a bit strange, because we know there's going to be a loss, and shouldn't we get that valued straight away?
So I think in relation to that, I think my understanding that the request was to specifically go out and get a valuation at that point in time. And what we said was that there would be a valuation done as part of the year-end process. So Sanderson Weatherall currently are the valuers that we are currently using, and they will value, or the requirement is to value each building at least every 5 years, unless it's an investment property, in which it has to be revalued every year. And both of those have different bases for valuations. There is a requirement for those assets that aren't valued. There is like a desktop review done, and we are expected to undertake an impairment review where possible, in liaison with the desktop exercise that the valuers have done. But on that specific one, we picked that up, and so that will be revalued as part of this year's valuation, and they are on with that at the moment, and we'll get the results back in April, and then we'll feed those through into the accounts for the year ending 30th.
So are you referring to the Mackenzie Arms?
Mackenzie Arms.
Excellent. Yeah. So we will get that. We're on with that now to get it. Sanderson Weatherall will do that imminently.
Part of a whole suite of instructions we've given them for the variety of, well, the list of properties that we have to ensure every property is valued at least once every 5 years, and investment properties are revalued every year. Yeah.
Thank you. So do you want to go on to your next bit, Louise? Oh, sorry. Did I miss something? Oh, sorry. I didn't see you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just a quick one to Louise. So will the Mackenzie be considered to be an investment property, or that will be valued once every year, or will it be in the other category?
Excellent. Yeah, I'll have to come back to you on that one because I don't know off the top of my head. I couldn't answer that question just to see how we've categorised it. Yeah, but
that if you've built something and you get an income from it, it sounds like an investment to me.
It is likely that's and if it is and it falls under the definition, because there's strict definitions as to what falls into each category, then then if it's an investment property and it's defined as such, then we would, and it would be done on a different basis, because so, yeah, investment properties look at the rentals that you accrue on specific properties, which might be a different basis of valuation to other properties that we would hold. So yeah, and that will be contained within the accounts. I will come back to you on that one. Yeah.
Just ask Matt a question, please. It's on page 8. And it's got materiality for senior officers' remuneration. It's only a small amount. It was 20,000, considering the amounts of money we've been just talking about in the millions. It just seemed a funny thing to be putting in with such a small amount. But I do see that it is assessed. Does it mean that that's just an amount that you think is there? And what does it actually mean? And why is it there? Thank you.
So just to clarify, materiality is the threshold that we determine where any kind of misstatement or omission in the accounts above that level would be significant to the user's understanding of the accounts. So the headline materiality is what we set for the accounts overall, the 922,000, as you can see there. And then what we do is we consider whether there are any areas or disclosures within the accounts that we should assess to a lower materiality, because they are they may be immaterial by the headline materiality, but will still be considered instrumental to the user's understanding of the account. So one of those areas is always the senior officer's remuneration. If we use the headline materiality, the whole amount would be immaterial, but actually that's, we know that there is high public interest in that disclosure. Therefore, we determined that 20,000 is the level at which we would accept any error within that disclosure. That doesn't mean that there are errors, obviously, within that, but that's just the starting point in terms of the how we focus on in our testing based on that level of threshold of error that we're prepared to accept. That makes sense. So it's not, we're not suggesting there that there isn't any issue with officers' remuneration because of that lower materiality. It's that we examine that disclosure to a much lower level of precision than the overall accounts, because an error or an omission of 20,000, we would consider that to be significant to the reader's understanding of the accounts, whereas 20,000 in terms of your overall expenditure doesn't really impact the understanding of the performance of the council. But because of the high public interest in that disclosure in the accounts, that's why we set the materiality so low.
Thanks very much. Just before we move on to the next bit, Councillor Foster had indicated you wanted to come back. Yep.
Yes, Chair. It's just some of the comments that Councillor Bretherton has just made to the committee then. I think some clarity is important for the committee, because I don't think the statements that Councillor Bretherton's made are necessarily factually correct, because the properties at the Mackenzie Arms sites have never been valued, ever, because they're still not finished yet. It's the land that was valued some years ago, and there was, if the committee remembers, And so you're not comparing apples with apples then. There was an intrinsic value for the land at the time, but there's obviously some challenges with that because of the overage contract that had been agreed on the sale of that land. And so to talk about impairments, et cetera, and a loss, nobody here can say that that project is at a loss because there's no evidence to substantiate that point, Chair, whatsoever. Those properties have never been valued. Those properties will be valued, and then obviously the sources of funding, et cetera, will be taken into consideration. The report will come back, but the project isn't at a loss. The project's coming under budget, and the original Sanderson Weather report was valuing it in a slightly different way, and what options may be available to the committee to say about impairment and a loss, et cetera, isn't necessarily actually correct, Chair. And I would urge the committee to wait for the final valuations to come through, and then we can take a view. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Foster, and we'll wait for Louise to come back with what she's offered already. Well, that's helpful. So back to you, Louise.
Already referred to when we came to committee on the 29th of November, we asked for approval of the accounts subject to completion of the audit. However, if there were any significant or material adjustments to the accounts, that the accounts will be then brought back to the Governance Committee for further approval. Based on the adjustments that Matt has just referred to and talked through, so an adjustment to the pension liability, an adjustment in relation to the cash balances in the consolidated accounts, a revaluation of the Hurst Grange asset, and also a reference to component assets and double counting, which I just referred to earlier. Those are considered material adjustments, and so I bring back for approval the accounts. The only adjustments that have been made are those that have been referred to in the reports. The accounts are exactly as they were as at the 29th of November, which were approved. So on that basis, it's just for your consideration and approval.
Thanks very much, Louise. Councillor Brotherton.
Sorry, Chair, through you, I just want to come back to Councillor Foster's
No, I'm not
comments.
taking, no.
He
No,
referred
Councillor
to
Brotherton, no.
report.
If it's to the last item, if you're referring to the Mackenzie Arms again, we're moving on. Thanks very much. If you want to write to me about it, we can deal with it that way. Okay, so item 5. Yeah. Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm chairing for this evening. Thanks very much. So item 5, we have some recommendations. And they are as follows: to note the audit findings report 2021 and 22, and to approve the adjustments to the statement of accounts that Louisa just talked about, 21-22. So for that, we need a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Rowd. Sorry, I had another question. You had something else?
I haven't asked committee members if they have any comments on this report.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. I thought we'd already done that, Councillor Holloway.
Right.
Yeah, I'll invite you now. Yeah.
You?
If it's on this item. Yeah, it is a bit.
Page 46, item 16 under comments of the Statutory Finance Officer. I'm just confused. I just need some clarification. I mean, this says all financial implications relating to the final budget outturn position have been set out in the Revenue and Capital Outturns Report 2021-22, which were considered by the Cabinet on the 20th of June 2022. So on the basis that all these misstatements were a result after our last meeting of the 29th of November 2022, what is the relevance of a report that went to Cabinet in June 2022? I don't quite follow what the statement's there to tell this committee. Thanks.
Okay, so the request is for approval of the whole statutory accounts, and the statutory accounts emanate from in the main from with regards to revenue, the revenue position of the council that was presented back in June as the outturn report. These late adjustments that have gone through wouldn't have impacted at all on the outturn report. Those are not items that would have been reflected in the revenue account, because they are either balance sheet items, so balances affecting cash or debtors. They are balances or adjustments relating to fixed assets on the balance sheet and depreciation, which we don't reflect in our revenue budgets. So the statement is in there basically because we're requesting an approval of the statutory accounts, and the statutory accounts are based, and the significant numbers in there are based on the outturn report. So that still stands.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. So can I just get it right in my head? I think it's important that I try to understand what is actually going into the accounts. So these 4 items that have been listed on page 45, they're not actually within the balance sheet itself as the revenue account. They're in a different section to it, and that's why there is no material change to the balance sheet that was actually presented to the November meeting. Is that right?
So there is no the figures that are listed there at point 10. It tells you the key statements which the material adjustments have impacted upon. They do impact upon the balance sheet, but they don't impact on the revenue account. And that the revenue account is what forms the outturn report, the revenue outturn report that was presented to Cabinet back in June last year. These are balance sheet movement items, or they relate to items that aren't included in the revenue outturn report. For example, the impairment at Hurst Grange would not have been reflected. We don't reflect impairments in the budget or in the revenue outturn report. Those are final adjustments that are dealt with as part of the statutory accounts. But they are balance sheet adjustments.
So when the balance sheet itself is prepared, there will be these adjustments put into the balance sheet.
So the accounts that were presented on the 29th of September, 29th of November, did not contain these adjustments, and therefore this is why we've come back tonight to ask you to reapprove the accounts, and the accounts are adjusted now for those entries that are there at point 10. That's the only adjustment that has been, what was approved on the 29th of November is exactly the same as the accounts now, apart from these adjustments which have now been reflected in there. Okay.
At the November meeting, and therefore I wasn't quite sure exactly what went through.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And you're absolutely right, you guys. So, any other questions or comments, members of the committee? Members not on the committee? Okay, so we have got those recommendations, and I'll read them out again. To note the audit findings report 2021 to 22, and secondly, to approve the adjustments to the statement of accounts 2021 to 2022. So a proposer and seconder is required, and then a vote.
Oh, bullshit.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Unsworth. All in agreement, or anybody against? Okay. Thanks very much. So that takes us on to item 6. Internal audit plan and progress update, and Dawn is going to present this item for us.
Thank you, Chair. So the plan you have, the report you have before you today is our internal audit report for between April 23 and September 23. We've again, we're going to follow the same process that we did last year in developing 2 6-month plans. It proved to be very beneficial and a positive experience in ensuring that our limited resource is focused on the highest areas of risk the council's facing at the time that we develop the plan. So the process we go through to develop the plan is detailed at paragraph 10, and the plan itself is contained at Appendix A. If I can just move on throughout the report, we've again been commissioned to provide audit for South Ribble Leisure. And whilst the outcome of each audit won't be presented to this committee, it will the annual opinion will be included in our annual report. We now have a very stable team within the audit service, and the details are provided under paragraph 13, alongside our performance indicators, which we're not planning to make any changes to. So since the last report in January, we have issued one internal audit report, which did receive a limited assurance rating, and it's attached to Appendix B to this report. It does highlight some areas of concern, which we gave a very short timescale to make sure those actions were implemented by. We are working really closely with the service and with the director to make sure those actions are implemented by those dates. And all the ones that were due to be implemented by the end of January, I can confirm have been either implemented or very near completion. As I say, I've attached the plan, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Dawn. So, questions from members on the committee? Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you, Chair. Just at page 21, paragraph 12. It has again been agreed that the Internal Audit Service will provide 105 audit days to the South Ribble Leisure Limited. Are the council being paid a commercial rate for those 105 days of effort?
We are paid to provide those dates, and what that has allowed us to do is bring in the trainee auditor to our service. And that's been a massive benefit to our service because it's helped with succession planning and bolstering, providing more resilience to our service. So we are being paid, yeah, and it has had a positive impact on the service.
Now, if I can just move on to the waste management report, unless there's other committees, perhaps committee members have got questions about the main report rather than the waste management report. Perhaps you would want to take those questions first. Yeah, okay. We'll come back to waste management.
Any other questions from members on the committee other than waste management? Okay, so we'll move on to that part.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is extremely disappointing, this report. Again, I have to congratulate the internal audit team for a very comprehensive and honest report. Unfortunately, like the last report you brought to this committee, it's raising a number of serious concerns. This is the second such report that this committee has received in the last number of months, which relate to health and safety deficiencies. That's bad news for our staff, very bad news for our staff, and ultimately for our residents. What all these issues that have been raised highlight to me is that this policy to go in-house was rushed. There was insufficient preparation taken, and that's confirmed by the issues that the auditors have identified here. There's a mention in a number of places about legacy issues. It doesn't say what these legacy issues are, but before this came in-house, either these legacy issues were known about and preparation wasn't taken to sort them out immediately, or the policy came in before the legacy issues had actually been identified. Both of these options, bad news, not good. If you look at the number of actions on pages 28 and 29, I appreciate that what you're saying now that not a lot of these actions have now been sorted, but at the point in time, which was 9 months into the running of the in-house service. Of the 62 actions mentioned in those tables, just 29% of those were actually working as intended. That is shocking, absolutely shocking. As I say, the biggest worry I've got is some of the issues relating with health and safety deficiencies. We had the previous issues on an earlier report about a lack of electrical safety certification, gas safety certification, and now we've got a whole load of issues with lack of training, lack of record keeping. But the one that really gets me is action 4 on page 32. There's a need to ensure that roles and responsibilities are clarified and formalised. Action date December 2023. So are we honestly saying that 18 months after this service was brought in-house, we won't know what people's roles and responsibilities are? That's unbelievable. I'm going to stop at that for just now, but there's 101 things in here that are concerning me. But I'll leave it at that for just now. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And we have our Sim with us as well, who may want to comment on this.
I wanted to start just by, first of all, explaining what the background to this particular audit report is. And it starts with essentially a voluntary audit review of this service following its insourcing in June 2022. And there are a number of reasons why Council made the decision to insource, and one of those decisions was to ensure that the credibility, health and safety, and the day-to-day operational procedures of this particular service are as a Council expect. This is one of those areas or pieces of work that helps inform the areas that we need to address in terms of the focus to identify. Not only identify the issues, but also address those following insourcing. There are a couple of examples within the report that I can give, which essentially has resulted in the Council identifying what the underlying risks and associated issues have been with this contract, which, with the best will in the world, looking at it from a contract management point of view, were not revealed until the point at which the Council took full control of this contract. The particular example, Councillor Ogilvie, that you just referenced, for example, in relation to job roles, I'm responsible operationally for the delivery of this service, and at the point of transferring the service and insourcing it, we've essentially insourced staff on the exact same roles that they were employed as they were with FCC. And the reason why that has remained unchanged is because this service is at a point at which it's like to go under significant transformation, not least because of the national agenda in relation to waste collection and recycling, but also in terms of the service itself, in relation to trade waste, day-to-day operations, the additional collection rounds, and operation of the depot. So it's not that from in terms of my responsibility, it's not that people are unclear about the roles on a day-to-day basis. What this in particular, this particular item is in relation to is the dependency of FCC on agency employees that were deployed essentially to cover day-to-day operations. What the Council has committed to doing, and we made some progress in this, we've appointed substantive staff as directly contracted by the council, employees of the council. But there are always going to be an element of dependency on agency staff because of the nature of this work. This service delivers to in excess of 50,000 properties across the borough. It's a frontline service, and you will get situations where, in order to maintain that service with annual leave, with unexpected sickness, we would have a degree of dependency on agency work. But in terms of the substantive reliance on agency, that has been removed following the insourcing, and we have recruited two, as reported previously a couple of weeks ago, 2 loaders and 1 HGV drivers. So again, I want to reiterate, this is more about getting the processes and the visibility and showing the evidence that some of those changes have been implemented. The substantive changes have been implemented by the end of March, as the report indicates, and further work is required to ensure that for the next review, the majority of issues that we've committed to delivering will be delivered.
Yes, Councillor Allen, continue.
Yeah, okay, I can see some of the points you're making there, but for example, some of the deficiencies in relation to people's induction to this new service, people being trained to carry out the service, that should not be. We're 9 months down the line. Are you telling me that people have not been inducted properly or have not been trained properly?
No, Councillor Ogilvie, I'm not saying that. The converse, what I'm saying is that at the point of induction, people were inducted to the council. That was undertaken. People were given the necessary background to the organisation, having, in excess of 25 years, this particular contract was outsourced. So the people who were insourced had open days. We had briefings with the staff that had been insourced. What we are trying to do is get to a point where some of the processes and procedures that were in place under FCC's management are assimilated into the council's processes and procedures. That's not to say that the compliance in relation to induction training, for example, has been undertaken, but I accept that there are things that we need to do to make sure that the visibility and the record management of that is effective to provide assurance that some of those objectives have been met. But in terms of insourcing, in terms of the necessary skills to undertake the job, in terms of the new technologies, in terms of staff time management, requests for leave, all those fundamental principles or requirements of an in-source contract at the day which the council took responsibility have been implemented.
Yes.
Just to move on to a couple of other specific points before I let other people come in. There's mention that there's a vacancy for the head of service. Can you confirm, is that because somebody has left that role, or has it just been established that that is a necessary role that the council needs in order to deliver this service? And the second point I've got is the use of agency staff. Can you tell us what the impact is on the forecast savings that were presented in the report that went to council when it was brought in-house? Thank you.
In relation to the first question, the head of neighbourhood and waste services has been appointed. The employee will start on the 18th of April. This was following quite major restructuring within the service. Going back probably 2 years, 3 years, there was a head of essentially operational services within the neighbourhoods team. That remained vacant for a while because obviously as part of the restructuring of that service, one of the developments since then has been the insourcing of waste. So the responsibility has been combined for neighbourhoods and waste. That post was advertised, and as I say, the post has been recruited to, and Barry Elder, who's appointed, will commence with the council on the 18th of April. In relation to the second point, I'm going to lean on my colleague, hopefully, to assist in this particular instance in terms of budget forecast. But safe to say that with the additional costs in relation to agency staff, the significant increase in inflationary pressures that the council has seen, both in terms of fuel and associated operational activity within the waste service. That particular contract, this particular service, actually is balanced, and actually, in terms of the forecast, with the proposal from FCC for an extended contract, taking the additional uplift in the contracted sum into account and allowing for the inflation increases, allowing for the day-to-day cost pressures within service, the actual saving, I think, is around £20,000, but I will be able to confirm that following this meeting. So the point I'm trying to make is, if you look at what this contract would have cost had FCC retained it, the council actually has undercut that with the additional modernisation, with the additional investment in that particular service it's undertaken since its insourcing.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. If I could just refer to page 33, it's item 5. The box at the end is empty. It doesn't say what a date in it or what may happen at this point. And the point of this item 5 is that operatives are currently working overtime to ensure that the rounds are completed as scheduled, and if this is maintained over a prolonged period of time, there is a risk that regularly working long hours adversely affects employees' work and health, with fatigue potentially increasing in absence levels and unsafe working practices. And there's nothing on the end of here to tell me how that is going to be addressed. That's my first point. Do you want to answer that now, or do you want me to carry on?
I'm happy to address it now. I mean, these are likely consequences of a prolonged, maintained or sustained reliance on additional hours and agency staff. And as I've alluded to in my previous response, that's something that we're alive to. It's something that we are looking at reviewing as part of the modernisation of the service. And indeed, some of the requirements that the government's expecting in terms of this particular service area. So in the round, that is something that we'll be looking at addressing. And at this moment in time, we have mitigated the reliance on agency staff. I mean, if you look at the day-to-day operation of this service, it's continued to deliver exceptionally well in very, very difficult circumstances. We've had challenges in relation to HGV drivers nationally, along with other local authorities. South Ribble Council's waste collection service has continued to operate effectively in that period and has done so safely. In comparison to other local authorities, some local authorities had to suspend services. South Ribble continue to do that effectively. So I accept that there are particular nuances or particular areas of concern within the report itself. But in terms of the commitments that we've made to deliver by the end of March, they've been delivered. And we're committed to addressing the remainder actions. In relation to the absence of the actual, I'm not sure which point you refer to, where it actually doesn't say anything.
If you look on the right-hand side,
Yeah.
in all the columns, they've either got January 2003, December 2003. On item 5, there is nothing. It's empty.
Yeah. I think that might be a...
If I can come in at that point, it's because it's addressed by Action 4. So it says there, on that second paragraph, the review of the service outlined in Action Forms aims to address this issue and ensure a fully resourced and experienced core operational team can be maintained. So we're referring to Action 4.
And we put that down into Action 5. That is December 23. It's the review. I'm more concerned about the operatives and the comments that are made about the unsafe working practices, if this continues, if this continues, and if we're talking about December 23 to get a review sorted out that would impact on this, that is 10 months, 9 months away. It's a long time for operatives to be. I'm concerned about this impact on them. That is my main concern at this point in time.
No,
and then
so-
if we go on to number 7, could you confirm, because this to me is something that really concerns me, is that the hazard and health inventories, the cost things, they are so important with our operatives. Have they now been all fully up to date and all been through the instructions and that is necessary on those particular issues?
Yeah, I mean, in relation to both points, I just want to reiterate that this is not about an unsafe working environment. To the contrary, this is a very high risk area in terms of heavy machinery. It's important and imperative that the council ensures the safety of its staff. For me, where we are at in relation to most of the items that are recorded as areas that need attention is the lack of evidence and the paperwork to substantiate the actual provide the confidence for and demonstrate that actually some of these areas have been undertaken, and that's the key thing that we need to concentrate on providing. In terms of actually day-to-day operations, I'm satisfied that this service is safe, has to be, both in terms of for staff and for residents. So it's mainly around providing the evidence and assurance to our internal audit team that actually these areas have been addressed and to provide that documentary evidence to support that.
Done, yeah.
If I can just come in reference to Action 7, everything with the January date has been implemented and we've seen the evidence.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the reassurance, because I really do feel very strongly about this. I understand what Mr. Khan is saying. I know exactly where you're coming from. It is a very dangerous and hazardous situation. You've got operatives moving around at the back of vehicles. Some of them say they haven't even got the CCTV in the cab. These are things that are fundamental to how you should be operating now. And I really am very concerned about this report because, people, it's the way they have to work that is so concerning. And if we don't get it right, we could have serious problems on our hands. And I'll leave it at there, but I would like to come back afterwards.
I certainly do. Councillor Shaw, then Councillor Unsworth, and then Councillor Brotherton.
I don't want to prolong it too much, but you've given us a good report here. You've now said that anything with January 2023 has been tested to be implemented, and I'm very reassured by that, because Action 9, and it's not really a declaration of interest, but if I could point out that my wife was, until she recently retired, a member of the Health and Safety Executive, and would be very concerned at she'd be very interested, her antennae would be flying out if somebody failed to report a RID or reportable accident even to the internal officer until a month after the event. The concern reading this report on this particular area is that if the outsourced reporting of near misses is quite high, but 20 events reported monthly in 12 months prior to the contract, and then decreasing over a period when it was within our gift to control it to only 2 events, June to November. It it would be a miracle of management to have suddenly removed all near misses, and the concern clearly with the internal auditors is that just isn't credible. I have to say, my thought went straight to Priory Lane in Penwitham, where an operative was dragged under the machine, and I would be deeply concerned that we are putting our staff at risk. The query I had for Asim really was, is there, or maybe for Dawn, is there a significant difference between the agency staff, who have their own ways of perhaps interpreting these things, and the in-house staff or the previously employed staff, or is it just a cultural thing within the service? I have in mind, for example, that Chorley have not moved to the internal arrangement. We haven't got a shared service with it. We haven't. They have a new contract with the people that we used, I believe, with the people we used to have. So is this a cultural thing that was within that company, within the freelance staff, or is there an impact for other councils? I'm worrying.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Shaw. Yeah, as I started off by saying that this is a voluntary audit that I requested specifically to baseline what the position was in terms of highlighting where the actual risks are for the council once we insource this service. Obviously, there is a need to evidence the actions that we've taken to address the remainder of those items. The ones that were required to be addressed by the end of January have already been done. But in relation to agency staff, when agency staff are deployed on the Safe Ribble Away service, they are inducted to the council's working procedures and practices, specifically in relation to operating machinery and the day-to-day delivery of that service. Clearly, depending on the length of time they spend with the council, it doesn't include some of the other elements of training and support that substantive directly employed members of our staff have, because in some cases they're not with us for long periods of time. But in terms of operating machinery safely whilst they are deployed, that induction is taken before they actually start on delivering the service. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Councillor Unsworth, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was looking at page 37, the action 12, which was about making information on the website more accurate so that hyperlinks worked, and that previous waste contractors, it says it's due to have finished now. Are we convinced that that is all up and running correctly now?
That's my understanding, but I shall check to make sure and come back to you. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Brotherton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Most of the points have already been raised by members already, but there was a couple that I'd just like to ask some questions on. On page 36, the testing, there's a significant decrease in the reported near misses. So from that, I'm assuming that when we had the private contract, there was more reporting going on, and then when the service came in-house, there was a sudden decrease. Now I'm assuming that the misses that were very, there was the same level of misses, but for some reason they weren't being reported. So maybe some explanation on what do you believe the reason is that the staff weren't reporting the incidents. Why were they not reporting them? And the other point was on page 38, and it's referring to residents report to the council, I'm assuming missed bins, for example, and that information wasn't passed on to waste management, the waste management team. It mentions here something to do with Firm Step. Maybe you could explain what that is. And at the council, do we have a system where if a resident calls the council to say my bin has been missed, I'm assuming somebody inputs the information to let the waste collections service know, does that person that received the call, do they check up to make sure the job has been done? Is there anybody there that checks up to see if it's been done? Otherwise, we could have a situation where residents are calling saying, my bin's been missed. Somebody picks up the phone, presses it, puts it down and forgets about it. And if everybody forgets about it, we could have a lot of upset and disappointed residents. So I'm just wondering if there's some follow through to that. So they're the queries that I had. Thank you.
So in relation to the first point you made, I think that's similar to the point that Councillor Shaw was alluding to. I've asked for some additional information in relation to this. As I pointed out throughout this session, for me, this has been more about evidencing and making sure that the processes are in place to actually undertake the recordings and provide that evidence to internal audit. And I've asked for some further clarification on that because I do not accept that we just had a significant decrease in near misses, and this is very much down to how I was reporting and how the systems changed in between the service being insourced and the council systems. And I'll follow that up in terms of a further update. In relation to your second and third point, I think they're interrelated. At the point of insourcing, we had to change some of the integrations between how systems work. Whilst we retained the same systems that FCC were using, we had to make some changes to the way the interoperability between the systems was carried out. And so the Firm Step solution essentially provides an internal mechanism to capture miscollections at the front line, whether that's face-to-face, through the website or by telephone. And then that information is then passed on to the operational services to ensure that effectively the miscollections are then returned to and taken on board. And there was some issue on the technical side of that, a teething issue, which my understanding is has been addressed. Just in terms of more detail about how the operations work. So essentially, when the crew are deployed, they collect streets upon streets of bins, and bins are assumed to be collected unless they are missed, and they're recorded as such with the in-cab technology that the waste collection team have. That is the baseline in terms of the performance for that day. If a resident then calls the contact centre to say that a bin has been missed, that is validated against what the crew have collected when they've been out and about. And depending on the status of that collection, that information is then captured in the appropriate technology, and that's passed to the operational service team electronically, who, depending on the legitimacy of that miss, because in some cases it may not have been presented on time. If it's an error on behalf of the crew, then obviously we revisit and collect those missed collections on that particular day or the following day.
Yeah, it was just a question of, is there anybody there that follows through? So if a resident says this has been done, is there somebody that checks up and follows through that the job's been completed effectively? Rather than relying on Firm Step as the person that took the call, do they follow it through?
Well, so obviously the resident knows that the collection has been missed. That's translated to the council. The council takes that on face value. It's passed to the operational team to verify that, and then go out and collect it. At that point, everybody's assuming that it's been executed. If it hasn't, we'll know about it straight away because the residents back onto us to say you promised to come and collect it and you haven't done. So there's no, wherever possible, we try to rely as much as possible on the technology. So if the resident has provided their contact details or an email, then obviously on the completion of that, systems should work effectively to send a receipt out to say that that collection has been missed, and if it's been challenged, then obviously we get a follow-up call to attend to that.
Councillor Shaw.
If I may, just an observation. I suspect that there will be people who will make that call, and they will make it more than once. One week, you missed my bin. A month later, they might have, you missed my bin again. It may just be that they are putting them out late, but you have to take them initially at face value. There's going to be some questions ultimately about how often we're going to be doing that.
Okay, Councillor Sharples.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's not a good read, this report. Dawn's highlighted these issues. We've got the report in front of us, and now what we're looking for as a committee is assurances. And so what we're saying, the ones that say January 2023, most of them, or the vast majority, are done. How close are we to getting the ones that are March 2023 out the way? But of course, I share Councillor Ogilvy's concerns about the December 2023. And as a committee, I think, is it not possible for us to get updates before the next meeting? You're updating us where we are with these, particularly what we're doing about that December 2023 one and how we're going to progress it, because that is a worry that those items are such a long date.
Yeah, I mean, this is a priority for the service. There's a new head of service being appointed on the 18th of April, and the first objective for head of service will be to ensure that we comply with all actions as soon as possible in relation to the audit recommendations. And hopefully I'll be able to provide that assurance at some point way before December 2023.
Thanks. Councillor Ogilvy.
Yeah, just a couple of quick factual queries. What is a confrontational register? Who has access to that? What information goes on it? And secondly, there's mention of a number of households who don't comply with the recycling policies. Do we have any data on the percentage of houses across the borough who effectively don't play the game and mix their recycling up to suit themselves rather than by colour of bin? Thank you.
Yeah, in relation to recycling, we do look at areas where there is cross-contamination of waste, particularly in terms of which bin waste is waste and recycling waste is placed, and we provide appropriate advice and support to residents to encourage recycling. But what I would say is that there is not just locally with our own residents, but certainly nationally, more awareness of the need to recycle. People are more aware of the responsibilities in terms of the council's green agenda, and in the report does allude to a new strategy, and that strategy will set specific, performance measures about recycling. But we do look at monitoring what waste we collect and waste contaminated, and highlight that to the person who's not adhering to the council's recycling policies.
The question really was that what's the magnitude of the problem?
Sorry, so I'll have to get that information. I don't expect it to be that significant in terms of numbers, but we do have the overall collection tonnage in terms of recycling and residual waste. But in terms of individual performance, in terms of each resident, I suspect that number is low, but I can confirm. I'll try and get that information and share with you.
Sorry, Chair, I'll pick up the confrontation register query as it falls within the health and safety part of my corporate function. The confrontation register is just an internal document that records where there have been incidents with members of the public at particular addresses, either incidents of violence or strong verbal confrontation. It's a management document, so it's used by team leaders in planning work. So it identifies locations where there could be an issue for staff attending. We're in the process of reviewing it because we've recently reviewed our lone working policy, and it's an appropriate moment to review the confrontation register as well. But that's the purpose of it.
So I guess the next question is, what sort of support is then given to the operatives when they are being asked to go to an area of confrontation?
Well, that very much depends on what they are being asked to do, and it's really for the manager to then seek to manage that attendance in the most safe and secure way. So, for example, it may be that instead of having a personal attendance, there is a letter sent instead to that particular address. In the instances of collection of bins, for example, it's probably more straightforward in that you have multiple people in the area. The confrontation register is mainly around lone working and people being there on their own, and it's trying to maintain that safe environment for staff.
Okay, thanks for that.
Councillor Smith.
Councillor Sharples just mentioned about some of them that are March 2003, and there is one particular one about March 2003, which is installing the extra CCTVs. We've got 6 at the moment, and we've got 17 vehicles. How confident are we that those other 11 will actually have them installed by March 23?
So that's one of the probably more challenging outcomes of the review and the date, only because it's part of a wider procurement exercise, not just in relation to the RCVs that were insourced last June. So at the point of insourcing, 6 vehicles have CCTV on them. We're looking at extending that to cover not only the remainder of the fleet, but also other council vehicles to ensure the safe use of those. And that procurement is underway, and it will be concluded for the end of March. But in terms of actually kitting out, that will start from April, and I'm hoping that it will be done quickly. But until the provider of those CCTV cameras can give me the timeline, obviously I'll share that with you at the point at which it becomes available. So the idea is to conclude the commercial discussions by the end of March, and then have the plan to actually install the kit on the vehicles.
Thank you. Thank you. If you could keep us informed of it, I think it would be very helpful to the committee to know how much progress we are making. I'm not quite sure who this comment is going to be actually aimed at, whether it's at Dawn or Chris or what have you, but I'm looking at these audit reports, and the one we have this evening is one that has got its report that the first line of defence has been breached in as much as senior management is put down as the first line of defence, and that has been breached in this instance. I think that is on page 30. I've got another report here, which is building maintenance, that we had some time ago, and it again comes back to the first line of defence has been breached, as in senior management. I've got another report here that you supplied us with, I think it was at the last meeting. Same thing, the senior management, the first line of defence has been breached. where do we go from here? How do we progress this to sort this out? It is concerning, I think, that we have had. Well, I've got 4 together tonight of reports that have all got the same rating on them. And we don't seem to be in a position where we have got something to tell us how we're going to get out of this, because we do seem to be in a bit of a hole from what I can see.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I'll take this one. I think what I would say in answer is that the actions have been taken in relation to the earlier reports. If you consider the senior management that was vulnerable in question, or that had been identified as being the first line of defence that had been breached, that management isn't in place anymore, and there has been a review that's currently taking place to try and bring in some resilience into those roles. And in this particular one, it's been mentioned tonight by Asim that there has been a further review of the service lead level posts, and there's a new service lead coming in to strengthen that senior management position in relation to waste. There are a number of senior posts coming into the organisation in the next few months. Service leads, I think there's 4 or 5. One's started 2 weeks ago, and this should start to improve the situation. I mean, when we discussed the governance environment in the last 2-3 years, the initial actions were to get the frameworks in place and the policies in place, which has largely happened. The next step is now to make sure we've got the correct resilience. You're right to highlight it, but the correct resilience at senior leadership level. And that's where I hope these reports will start to dwindle.
Thank you. I thank you for that. I understand where you're coming from, and it's a concern, I think. It must be a concern to you. It's a concern to all of us that we need to have this level. And the fact that we're now going to get 6, I think it is, or 7 new people in. I know that's why at Shared Services it was decided that it was better to have a pause so that we could all make sure that everything is going to work and we can embed these people into the service. I don't want to put any more work on Dawn. I know she has enough. But at some point, would it be helpful to this committee if we had sort of an update, a general update of the fact that all these outstanding issues have actually been completed? At some point, I know you do that because you check up, don't you, along the line to make sure that the compliance is there. Would it be helpful? I'm just making a suggestion. That it maybe just help us all.
Yeah, I think given the amount of limited reports that we've had delivered to this committee over the past, 12, 18 months, what I will do in the annual report is I'll take each report separately and I'll highlight how many actions have been implemented from each of those reports, if that's helpful.
I think that would be helpful. I think it would give reassurance, well, it would to me anyway, that things are moving in the right direction.
Absolutely, thanks for that. I think we'd all agree with that. Yeah, Chris.
Thanks, and I think just to provide further assurance to the governance committee, the senior leadership, senior management team do take these matters very, very seriously. Now, obviously, Mr. I nearly called you Councillor Khan then, sorry. Asim has attended this evening because he's owning this report. It's his service and he has taken control of it. And we've had conversations where he is stepping up and saying, OK, these are issues that have arisen on my watch and I'm going to sort them out. And that is the approach that the senior management team is going to be taking moving forward. God forbid any more of these reports come forward, you will see the director from that directorate attending to explain to the committee why it has happened and to try and provide that assurance to you that if there has been a breach at senior leadership level, that we're owning that and we're taking steps to prevent it happening again.
Thanks for those comments. Yeah, let's hope so. So any other comments from any members on the committee? Members not on the committee? Okay, so we do need to vote on this. So the recommendations as follows. The committee approves the internal audit plan and associated indicators. We need a proposer and seconder and then a vote on this, please. Proposed by Councillor Shaw.
No second.
Seconded by Councillor Bretherton. Thanks very much. Anybody against this? Okay, so that's unanimous. Moving on. So, oh gosh, we've got lots of bold writing to read out here. So we now move to considering an urgent item, which has been agreed by the chair, that's me, and in accordance with paragraph 5.5 of part 4 of the council's constitution. The local code of corporate governance is an important document which provides the framework for our compliance with good governance standards. The annual governance statement tests the internal control environment against our local code. It's therefore important that it can be considered at the earliest opportunity, and that's why we're doing it now. So item 7, urgent item, local code of corporate governance, and Chris is going to present this for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do apologise to members of the committee for the late receipt of this report. With my usual sense of timing, unfortunately, I was off ill on the day that the agenda was actually published, so I missed it, which is why it came late. This is not a document I think that will take you by surprise. This is a document that you have reviewed twice in the last couple of years, and on the last occasion it was presented to you in substantially this form. There are some very minor amendments to the appendix to Appendix A to the report, which is the meat of it, if you like. These are the documents that I've referred to and policies that I've referred to that support our compliance with the Sit for Solace recommended good practice local code. It's been a long day. Sorry, the Sit for Solace code from 2007, which was updated in 2015. So there are 7 principles of good governance. These are identified within the local code, and the appendix identifies each of the individual principles, and then it refers to the policies and procedures the council have in place that support the compliance with that principle. There is only really one change in presentation to that appendix. The council adopted in the last 12 months the new equalities framework, which replaced the old equality and diversity policy we had in place. So it is really only a terminology change to the document, albeit the framework behind it has changed. So I'm quite happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions or comments on this item? Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, just a very quick one. I did notice the change about the equality framework, but I struggled when I looked through the document to see any particular reference to that change. Can you just point us in the direction of where it's actually called up?
Sorry, Councillor Ogilvie. Yeah, if you look at page 11, there's key documents ad hoc review, that box in the middle of the 3 at the bottom. It refers to the equalities framework. And then I think it's the penultimate principle. Just quickly check through. You're really testing me now. And this is where you remind me, Councillor Ogilvie, I promised to highlight changes, isn't it?
What did you say?
Yeah, I know. I'm going to miss you. I know. Pardon? Sorry.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry. Under C, thank you. Just getting. So it's, yeah. So it's on page 16, towards the bottom of the box on the right-hand side. So it's the equality frameworks and impact assessments reference.
I reckon you would be able to find it a lot faster than I would. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other questions, comments? on the committee? Not on the committee? Okay, well, thanks very much. So, so we've got a recommendation for this, that the committee approves the local code of corporate governance, appendices A and B to the report. So a proposer and seconder is required.
I'll propose to.
Proposed by Councillor Sharple, seconded by Councillor Ogilvie. Anybody against this? No. Well, that's approved. And that brings us to the end of this meeting. So thank you very much for your attendance and your contributions.